Well, we've finally made it to The Last of Us Part 2, and just before I get into this review, because I have a shit ton of stuff to say, I wanted to let you know that I will try to keep this review spoiler-free. This video is a bit late in comparison to other people's reviews, but I still want to keep it spoiler-free in case there's someone out there that hasn't played the game yet, because they are more expensive than a movie, they're longer too, and you know what I mean? So, they're not a movie. You can't just get through them in quick succession. So, because of that fact, I wanted to keep it as spoiler-free as I can, while also dipping into some of the spoiler things about this game, and being vague about some of the stuff that everyone else really wants to hear my thoughts on and really wants to talk about, right? I will talk about them, but in such a vague way that someone who hasn't played it or hasn't gotten up to a certain point in the game won't know what I'm talking about, okay? But hopefully you all understand what I'm saying, where I'm coming from. So with that said, let's get into this review. And so we begin with the story. This game essentially picks up right after the first with a great scene between Joel and Tommy, and the choice that Joel makes at the end of the first game does have massive ramifications for this game moving forward. His relationship with Ellie was tested in ways that I did expect, but was happy with how they handled it. Speaking of Ellie, this is a very different Ellie to what we saw in the first game. This is a revenge story, which isn't a spoiler. What I will say though is what I thought the reason for her revenge would be actually turned out to be something else. And I think if it were something or someone else, we wouldn't have sided with her on this revenge quest as much as we did, which has also become a problem for some people who have played this game, but we'll get into that a little later. It's no surprise that this game has new characters, like Dina, for example. I love Dina. Her and Ellie are in a relationship, and I actually came to care a lot about this character because of the things we learn about her, her religious background, the first time she killed her sister, all of that stuff, and there's even more stuff that if you go to certain locations in the game, if you do certain things, you will learn even more about this character. So I did like this character, and she has a lot to deal with, which, speaking of, Jesse was an alright character. I liked him, but I just didn't care about him as much as I did with Ellie or Dina or Tommy or any other character, really. I just didn't care enough about this character. Abby, however, is a character that is getting a lot of hate for some reason, and as everyone has come to know, you get to spend a lot of time with this character. You play half of the game as this character. I did not mind that, because even though you hate her at first, you might actually end up understanding her a little bit, or caring about her like I did. And when it comes to playing half of the game as this character, Abby, I did not expect that. And even though I wasn't as emotionally invested in Abby's storyline as much as I was with Ellie's, there was still a lot of enjoyment to be had with her story. You at times see how loosely her timeline, her storyline converges with Ellie in subtle ways, and whenever she'd get hurt, I was right there with her. I slowly became invested in this character to the point where, as I said, I cared about this character. I cared what happened to her. You see her lose people throughout the entire game, and even though you might not be sad to see them gone, you might actually be sad to see what it does to Abby herself. Which brings me to what I loved about this game, and possibly my biggest point when it comes to this game and what it's trying to tell the player. It's not a simple revenge story. For all those complaining about that, right? You know what I'm talking about? It's not a simple revenge story. It's not meant to give you what you want. It's meant to give you what the characters need for their arc. I'm actually pissed off about the shit that people are saying about this game and how irrelevant it actually is to the story. Anyway, thankfully, because this is a Last of Us game, perspective is a powerful thing. And this game has a lot to say about vengeance, violence, killing, retaliation, war. It touches on all these subjects in just one game and shows you the morality or lack thereof behind these actions that our characters are making, how it affects them, how far they're willing to go to get what they want. And I honestly really think that people complaining about this game need to see it for what it is. And you really need to just take a minute and just think about it. Just meditate on it, sit on it, alright? Just think about it, alright? Don't jump to conclusions Just try and see what the creative director and the game director are trying to tell you in this story. People complaining about the game have said that it's too violent, it's too dark. I mean, what were you expecting? Were you expecting to not kill a dog? I mean, yeah, they didn't have to put that in the game, but for fuck's sake, the first game wasn't really that nice either. It had light moments, but it wasn't all nice. This game also has nice moments, but it's not all nice. It gets very dark and gritty, which is exactly what the first one was about. Listen, you cannot expect to be put in a post-apocalyptic world where everyone's trying to kill you and think that you can just save every dog, like you have the choice not to kill a dog. Seriously, from me to you, if you're one of the people that have been complaining about having to kill dogs in the game, if there was a dog that was trying to kill you, right, and it nearly came close to killing you, the truth of the matter is, mate, you would fucking kill the dog. Because you would want to survive over a fucking dog. I know, in the real world, you don't want to kill dogs. You don't have to kill dogs. You shouldn't kill dogs, because in reality, it's abuse, right? But in a world like this, like The Last of Us is proposing to its players, of course you're going to kill a fucking dog to survive. I don't know. I've had enough of the bitching. This is, I'm going off book now. I didn't even write this in my notes. I'm so tired of this. It's ridiculous, okay? It's whinging. It really is. I challenge you to play this game. I challenge you, really, to play this game through to the end and not at least understand where each character is coming from. I'm not saying you have to side with them, but you can at least understand where they're coming from, like Abby and Ellie. You can understand where both characters are coming from. Dina also makes a choice that not everyone liked, but if you look at it from her perspective, you'd probably make the same choice. Where did that come from? Holy shit. Okay. In all seriousness, this game does have one big problem, and it's pacing. This is a thing that many people have mentioned in their reviews. I myself noticed it before watching those reviews, and I agree. The game does way too much jumping around to moments and conversations that we really didn't need to experience in the first place. And while we're on the topic of time jumping, I must say that even though I loved Abby's storyline, we didn't need to go all the way back to Seattle Day 1 when, in actuality, what could have happened is they could have just edited the game. You know, you can edit a game kind of like a film. Obviously, it's a little different. I don't understand games completely, but I know that there could have been a way where they could have had Abby's and Ellie's storyline occur chronologically. You could have cut in between Abby and Ellie's storylines through Seattle Day 1, 2, and 3, and not have to go all the way back to Seattle Day 1. That, for me, honestly did ruin the pacing, especially by the end of Seattle Day 3, when all the momentum is built into this one scene, and we just start from the beginning. Honestly, I don't understand why that choice was made. The game would be better off if we had less flashbacks, right? If we had less flashbacks, that would have been better. Still keep some of them, but not all of them. Take some of them out. And don't take us all the way back to Seattle Day 1 to do all that over again with a different character. Yes, it was nice to see it from Abby's perspective with certain scenarios that were thrown into and how that connects to Ellie's storyline, but you still could have done that if they had let us play that out chronologically instead of... I mean, pacing-wise, this game is all over the place, but the story and the characters are very well realized. And now let's move on to the gameplay. On the topic of gameplay, the first thing that I notice is how much bigger the world is. You get way more room to explore than you ever did with the first game. And the need to explore, or the want to explore, can become a great asset. Especially if you don't, you kind of miss out on some things that you might well need later on in the game, like a shotgun. There's this huge open area at a point in the game where you can explore it all. If you do want to do that, you can find a shotgun, which you might end up using later on. Now, this is another complaint that people have had, that they didn't like how big the world was, how much you had to explore, and they didn't like having to scavenge for supplies. Can I just say something about that one complaint about the gameplay? I actually have 2 points for it. The first point is, the first game did that. What were you expecting? Of course the second game was going to have you scavenging for supplies if the first game did that. Why wouldn't it? My second point is that people loved the first few Resident Evil games. because it was survival horror and it wasn't all guns and ammo like a lot of games are these days. People loved Resident Evil for its survival horror, for its scavenging and stuff like that, for its puzzle solving. But then later down the line, the games became action games, and people didn't like that. It didn't sell well. So I personally find it really hypocritical for people who are reviewing this game to say that they didn't like the scavenging, they didn't like the exploration, when it comes to another franchise, they loved it and hated it if they tried to do something else. I just find that extremely hypocritical, especially seeing as I myself loved that because it continues on what the first game did. I just don't think it's a valid point to make in anyone's review if it's going against what you have said. Anyway, as mentioned earlier in the story, you get to play Abby for an entire half of the game, which is pivotal for the story, as I mentioned, as I went into. But concerning gameplay, I did like seeing how differently she played to Ellie, whereas with Ellie, you would use a bow and arrow, with Abby, you would use a crossbow. And I kid you not, I fucked up with the crossbow so many times at first that I just didn't use it. I eventually started using it later down the line because when I first used it, I forgot that you don't pull back on a crossbow. You just shoot like a gun, right? I totally forgot that. So I fucked up many times. But when I got it down, it was really fun. But I must say, there were a couple missions with Abby that were so infuriating, so ball-numbingly enraging, that I just wanted to take a minute to tell you that fuck this boss fight. Fuck that boss fight. That thing was oh my god, I could not see anything. I could not see a thing. On a lighter note though, the combat in this game is phenomenal. I have not played a game that has combat that looks this great. Might not play the best, but it looks great to me, and it did feel kind of great having, okay, so the dodge mechanic. They added a dodge mechanic, and every time you would dodge someone's punch or swing, the camera would move in motion with that dodge. That made this game feel even more cinematic than the first one ever did, and the first game was actually pretty cinematic. And as someone who loves cinema, that was a great addition to the gameplay. Now with the first game, I didn't mention the graphics in my review because it's already been said a billion times how good the graphics were for the first game. And I'll admit, they were great, but I knew this game would surpass that with flying colors, and does it ever. This game also surpasses a lot of games that have come out recently with its graphics. I mean, Spider-Man PS4 doesn't look as good as this game, and that game looked great. The newer Resident Evil remakes, they looked great too, but not as good as this game. During conversations, you get to see characters have micro expressions, like their lip will move. They'll scratch like their beard or something. It's little shit like that adds to the experience and it makes it feel like you're actually watching a real person perform something in front of a camera. Also, killing people was very satisfying, and I'm not promoting violence in any way or whatsoever, but I just loved killing people in this game because of the facial expressions they have. It was in the first game, but it just didn't look as good as it does in this game, where their eyes will move, you can see their mouth, it looks so good it actually makes you feel like you're killing someone. Is that really a great message to send? I don't know, but I was joking then, I wasn't being serious, because this game, look, I'll be serious with you guys. Even though this game had some massive problems when it came to pacing, the story hits home for me. The characters I loved and related to so much, and I think its message is clear. The message that they're trying to tell players with this game comes through. Really what this game is about is vengeance, violence. That's what this game is about. It's about vengeance. Whereas the first one was about loss and loneliness, this one is about vengeance and retaliation and how that affects, people. So I really love what the Last of Us games are doing. I hope they make a third one. They probably will, but when they make a third one, I want them to touch on something else. I don't just want them to rehash the first two games, because what they're doing is really unique. And every great trilogy touches on some subject matter and makes that the themes and goes into the themes of that with each movie. Now, the Dark Knight trilogy did it. I really think that if they make a third one and it ends up being better or just as good as this one, we will have the first truly great cinematic video game trilogy to ever exist. That's what I think. Anyway, that's it. I love this game. Yes, it has its problems, but I love the game. So I guess I'll see you in... Oh shit, I guess I'll see you in my review for The Last of Us Season 1, the TV show on HBO. Oh my god, I can't wait. I'll see you in that video.